What I want to address tonight is the topic of the evil eye. I want to look at it from a few perspectives. Firstly, is the evil eye real? Is it a real concept? Is it part of mainstream Judaism? Or is it just found in those Kabbalah centers, you know, where all those celebrities go in New York or LA, wherever they are? And if it is real, does it have any impact in halakha, in Jewish law? How does it actually work? And how you can avoid it if it does exist? And you'll find, and probably, you know, amongst your own friends, you'll actually find that for the evil eye and all these superstitious things, there are many who are big believers in it. And then the other end of the spectrum is people think it's a load of rubbish. And then there's a bunch of people, not many people in the middle. It's sort of like those who do and those who don't. You don't really find people in the middle. So that's quite interesting. But I'm sure you can all tell me about superstitions that you keep in your family. And some of them we'll discuss tonight because some of them are pretty common. And we'll discuss whether they have any source in the Jewish religion or whether they're completely made up. But we'll also see how we discuss it even nowadays. So the first thing I looked at before preparing for the shiur is if you look at Encyclopedia Britannica, or you can go to Wikipedia, and you'll actually find that the concept of the evil eye is nearly in every religion. And just before this call, I called one of my colleagues from work, who's from Armenia. She's an Armenian, is that a religion? Yeah, Armenian religion. I think they're sort of, the sort of type of Christian. And I said, do you have the evil eye in Armenia, in your Armenian culture? And she said, yes, they do. It is called the evil eye. I said, how do you get the evil eye? Often it's from jealousy. And what they do is use the blue string. That's interesting because the Jewish people, have the red string. So you've got the blue string. But they also use some type of fish eyes and things like that. And she told me that when she got a new car, which happens to be a very nice one, it's like a Mercedes or something, her grandmother told her something about the evil eye. So the evil eye is not something that's unique to Judaism. Every religion has it. And you'll look at, you know, parts of India where they do cross-dressing for weddings, and that's to avoid the evil eye. And you'll find in some Asian countries where they blacken the eyes of children. So all of that is part or comes from the same source as what the Jewish religion does. But I guess the question for us is it part of Judaism, or is it something that's sort of crept in based on the fact that we've lived in different countries around the world? So the question is it real? Now, I do actually have a source sheet, but it's all in Hebrew. So I thought I'd just read it to you rather than show you on screen, because you'll probably end up just trying to find out where it is. But I can share with you later. And Judy, if you'd like a copy after, I can send it to you with all the others as well. So if you look at Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our fathers, you know, a famous Mishnah, it says like this. How do we know what is the evil way or the bad way a person should keep away from? In other words, the ethics of our fathers teaches us many things about the way we live. And this says, how do you keep away from evil, for bad things? So Rabbi Eliezer says, what is a bad thing? He says, ayin ra'ah, a bad eye. So the Mishnah itself talks about the fact that there is this concept of a bad eye, and we need to keep away from it. Now, there are other ideas. For example, Rabbi Yehoshua says, keep away from a bad friend. That makes sense. You know, friends can bring you down. Rabbi Yossi says, bad neighbor, right? Some of us have bad neighbors. I've had one for a long time, but they've gone now. But, you know, bad neighbors can really ruin you as well. So there are different pieces of advice about how to have a good life and keep away from evil. But Rabbi Eliezer one says, ayin ra'ah, a bad eye. Now, he doesn't really explain what that means. What is a bad eye? There is another Mishnah in Pirkei Avot. Rabbi Yeshua says the following. He says, an evil eye, an ayin ra'ah, a yetzer hara, the evil inclination, and hatred of people. You know, people just hate others for no reason. Take away a person from this world. So both these sources in the Mishnah, so ayin ra'ah, an evil eye, definitely does exist, but it's not the concept that we're thinking about. So we often think about this evil eye and it sort of hangs on people and we want to get rid of it. The way the Mishnah actually refers to it is someone having a bad eye. In other words, someone who it's in their nature to have a bad eye and a bad character. So I think tonight we're going to spend the next hour talking about the evil eye, but I think we need to go in with an open mind, because you've obviously come here tonight to work out, does Judaism believe in this evil eye? Now I think, and to answer that question is we have to go in and give you the definition of what we consider an evil eye, and then tell you if we believe in it or not and how we deal with it. So we have to sort of throw away concepts of all these other evil eyes that we've heard from other religions and think about what the Jewish people say about it. You know, and we will get onto the end if we have time, you know, about the black hat and walking under an umbrella, opening an umbrella inside and walking under a ladder. We'll talk about those later because they're all part of the same concept. But the fact is, tonight we're going to talk about where this evil eye comes from in the Jewish religion and how it's got distorted over the years, which it really has if you learn a bit about it. So where we're up to now is the evil eye real? It says yes, it is. The Mishnah refers to as someone having an evil eye, not necessarily about where the evil eye's landed, but about us having an evil eye ourselves. It's called the ayin ra'ah, a bad eye, an evil eye. Now, I'm going to throw a few different Talmudic concepts at you, and we'll try and piece it all together because the reference to the evil eye is throughout the Talmud, throughout the Mishnah, and therefore you'll probably realize at the end of this that it is real. It is something that we believe in as a religion, but maybe not the way you've been thinking about it until now, because the way after studying this, prepare for this, I've also changed my mind about it. So there's a piece of Talmud that says that there was a rabbi who walked around the cemetery. It was actually, his name was Rav. He was just known as Rabbi, the Rav. And he walked around the cemetery and he said that out of 100 people buried here, and you know, talking percentages, 99% of the people died from the evil eye and 1% died naturally. So he said, basically as a statistic, 99% of people die today because of the evil eye. Only 1% die of natural causes, which is quite a big call to make. So again, the concept of evil eye is real. And this rabbi believed that most people in the cemetery, I guess if you went to Springvale, and he'd walk around and say 99% of people buried here died from the evil eye. And it's actually quite a scary Gemara if you think about it, you know, that we're all dying from evil eyes instead of just, you know, natural causes. But again, we'll see what that means in a second. Now, the Torah also talks about the fact that we count people, and well, the fact that you can't count people. So we know that in times of the temple, they counted the Jewish people, they did a census, but they didn't do it by counting numbers. They didn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, right? They did it by everyone giving a silver coin into the temple, and they counted the coins. And the Torah tells us that we do not count people. We're not allowed to count people. And we know that if we get to a shul and we want to count 10 men for a minyan, we don't say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Because that brings the evil eye. We count them, either we count the yarmulkes, how many yarmulkes are in shul. Doesn't always work in our shul because some people forget to bring theirs sometimes. But we also count, there's a special verse that says, that has 10 words in it. And you point to each person and you say the word. So we don't count people. And the Rashi tells us that the reason we don't count people is because when you count people, it brings the evil eye. So when we actually count things, it brings the evil eye. So that's another source for it. Another one is from the Maharal. You might have heard from the Maharal. He's from the city of Prague. He's the one that created the golem, right? You've all heard of the golem before. And he was obviously a great rabbi and a great Kabbalist as well. And he also, in his book that he writes, his Kabbalistic book, he talks about the fact that when you count, the Mishkan was destroyed, or the temple was destroyed, because we used to count the objects in there, right? So even the temple itself was destroyed because of Ayin Hara, because we counted, you know, there were 10 vessels and 10 sacrifices and three gold pieces. So every time we counted, it brought the evil eye. But he also explained, and those of you that were in the shiur last time, and we know that the 10 commandments were destroyed and then they were given again. But it seems that the whole big fanfare about the 10 commandments was actually about the broken ones. You know, that happened on just after Shavuot, and then, you know, the other ones were very quiet. And he says the reason that the first tablets were destroyed was because we made a very big fanfare about it. You know, a sort of thunder and lightning and a big mountain, and everybody saw it. And because we made such a big public display of these 10 commandments, they were destroyed. So what he's actually saying is there are two things that bring the evil eye. The first thing is when we put on a public display, we make things public. And the other one is when we count it. So what brings the evil eye? When we count things and when we bring a lot of publicity, okay? And this is a concept we probably have heard from. So we've sort of moved away from having a bad eye, being an evil person, to the fact that we don't like publicity. And where do we see that in practice? We know that when you ask someone how many grandchildren you have, you know, So the real old people from Europe used to say, oh, I've got quite a few, but they never want to say how many. But let's say I've got 17 grandchildren, I've got a few grandchildren, or they say I've got 17 Kanai Nahara, or Bli Ayin Hara. So people don't like to count their blessings. And that's part of either both counting and also making things public. So you'll find a lot of people don't like to show off too much and make these big fancy things. They don't like the Ayin Hara. So that's quite interesting. We also know that in our prayers every morning, just after the morning blessings, we actually say a prayer that God should save us from the evil inclination, from a bad neighbor, from a bad friend, from a plague, which would be nice nowadays, keep us away from the coronavirus. And of course, from evil gossip, and what does it say? From the evil eye. So actually we pray every morning to keep the evil eye away from us. So back to my original question, is the evil eye real? Is it part of Judaism? Yes, it is. We do believe in it. And I've already discussed concept. The first concept was the fact that we should not have an evil eye. We should not look at things badly. But also the fact that we don't like to bring evil eye on us by either publicly displaying our goods or by putting numbers on things. Okay? So that's the evil eye. Now, so the concept exists. We get that. And I assume no one's disagreeing with me, all sort of listening, which is good. And I don't know what you all think of on this call, whether you'll believe in it or not, but there it is. It is in halakha. Now, does it actually have a basis in the way we run Jewish law? That's the next question. So it could be this esoteric thing. It doesn't have a basis in Jewish law. Now, the friend I mentioned before from Armenia told me that in her religion, really they don't believe in the evil eye, but everyone worries about it, which is quite interesting. And I think we're a bit the same. We sort of say, we believe in God, but there's also this evil eye. Which one do we have to be careful of? But I asked the question, does it have a basis in Jewish law? And in fact, it does. We've got to, if you look in the Talmud, and we haven't studied this together, but there's a tractate called Bava Basra. And Bava Basra is monetary law, civil laws, and there's actually zoning laws. So how you want to build a house, you have to go to local council and you have to get permission, and there's zoning laws. Well, the Talmud also had zoning laws, which is quite interesting. And part of the zoning laws was as follows. It says you can't look into another person's property. We don't, halachically, you are not allowed to look into someone else's house, right? Over their fence and see what they're doing. No, we all do it because we don't see what the neighbors have in their back garden, but you're not supposed to look into somebody else's house. And therefore it says, when you buy a block of land, don't buy it in the middle of the city, right? And there's two reasons for that. Firstly, you don't want people looking into your property, and also you don't look into someone else's property. So it says, if you buy a block of land, buy it a bit further away. Now, it doesn't really work nowadays because where are you going to buy? We're not going to move out to, some far-fetched place. We have to buy in Melbourne. You can't say I'm going to buy in Geelong. It's also built up, right? But in those days, they did have the luxury of buying in certain places. So the Mishnah says, or the Talmud says, there are two things. Firstly, don't look into somebody else's property. But secondly, don't even buy a property near somebody else so you're not the victim. It's actually giving you two pieces of advice. Don't look into somebody else's property, but because you don't want to give them ayin hara, but don't let them look into your property either. You don't want people looking at you. So you don't want to be victimized by their evil eye. Now, and that's part of the zoning laws. Part of the zoning laws in the Talmud also talks about when there are two neighboring properties, the Talmud discusses having to put up a wall between it. So we have those laws today in civil law and Australian law. But the Talmud also had it back then. It says two neighbors are required to put up a wall and discusses the quality of the wall. Do they share the costs? And what if one wants a stone wall or one wants a wood wall? Who pays for it? The Talmud discusses all that. But the point is, it's saying to you that two neighbors should have a fence above it. It's very important that neighbors have a fence because you don't want people looking over. You don't want causing the evil eye. Now, it's actually looking over someone else's property is considered damage. You could probably sue somebody in Jewish law for looking into your property. And there are three reasons given for this damage. The first one is you don't want the neighbors talking about you. You don't want evil gossip. The second one is people should have their own independence and freedom. But the third one is you don't want the evil eye to come into yourself. So actually one of the rules of building a fence and not looking into neighbor's property is the fact that it gives the evil eye to the neighbor, which is not a good thing. And that actually is common halacha nowadays. So like if Israel ran by Jewish law, it'd be very important laws about making sure that you can't look into other people's properties. In Australian law, we have those rules anyway. You know, if you build a house, you have to block out windows. But it's not something that the Australians invented. It was actually in the Talmud, which is quite interesting. So halachically, there is a basis for ayin hara, which I just discussed. There's another one also, which you'll notice in Shule, and if John Slutscombe is on the call, he'll be able to tell us, but like Len's here as well, he'll be able to tell us. Len, we know that when we call people up to the bima to get a call up, we do not call father and son together, and we don't call two brothers, one after the other, right? That's a special rule we have. In fact, we don't even call a grandfather and a grandson. And does anyone know why we do that? Why can't we call two brothers or father and son? Len, do you know why? You're the gabbai. He's on mute. He probably knows the answer. You're on mute.
Me?
Oh yes, we don't. Yes, I understand it to be the principle of it looks like we own and we've taken over the bima. That family's taken over the bima. Makes it
exactly. But the problem with that, no, you're right. But what is the problem with taking over the bima? It causes jealousy, right? But people go, oh look, Hillel's got the bima, and then his son get called up, and his grandson got called up. Who does he think he is? And then it causes jealousy amongst people. So that's actually ayin hara. The reason we don't call a father and son or two brothers is so people don't say they are hogging the bima and cause an evil eye. So it's actually for evil eye reasons. So that's another practical rule about the evil eye. Now, we also know that on Rosh Hashanah, there's a custom to eat fish, right? And we say a little prayer, and we eat the fish head as well. And what we do is we say there that we want to, why do we eat fish on Rosh Hashanah? So one prayer is to say we want to multiply like fish, because we know that fish have lots of babies in one go, and we want the Jewish population to expand and explode, right? But the other one is we eat fish because fish are hidden, right? They swim under the water, and they don't get ayin hara, right? And if you look at some of those Hamsa symbols, you'll notice that a lot of them have to do with fish, right? Fish is mentioned quite a bit. Just mute you there. Sorry, it's back to my thing. And we know that fish has a lot to do with ayin hara because fish are hidden, and that's why we eat the fish on Rosh Hashanah, to remove the evil eye. So the big question is, we've answered two questions so far. Does the Jewish concept have evil eye? Yes, it does. Does it have an impractical impact for us? Yes, it does in halakha. We know that as well. The question is, how does it actually work? So how does this evil eye actually work in the Jewish religion? So I know other religions might have their own opinions, but I'm just talking about the Jewish religion. How do we Jews see the evil eye working? And of course, with all these things, there's many different ways you can look at it, many different ways. So I'm going to give you 4 different approaches to the evil eye. And some of them you might think, oh yeah, that makes sense. And some you might think, oh, that's a bit strange. And some you may have heard of, and some you may not have. But that's okay. That's part of the shiur. We're allowed to have discussions and opinions. I'm going to give you 4 different opinions about what the evil eye actually is. And then we'll talk about later about how we can get rid of it. Okay, how we get rid of it. Now, the first one is that the first one is from Rabbi Nagel. Rabbi Nagel was a rabbi who lived in the 13th century, one of our early commentators. And what he's saying is that an evil eye means somebody who is not happy with what they have. So everyone's got their own lives, they've got their own house and their cars and their own pakulas, people say it. But some people are never happy. Like they look at their neighbors and go, oh, I mean, I've only got a Toyota and he's got a nice Mercedes. Why has he got a nicer car than me? What did he do different? Or you might see one of your school friends who's successful or has something different or looks happier than you. So we know that the ethics of our fathers tell us that who is a happy person? Somebody who's happy with with his lot. If you're happy with what you have, you're a happy person. But there are people that look at others and go, oh, it'd be nice if I could have that. Why are they so special? And his view is that is ayin hara. Why is it ayin hara? It is causing you, it eats up you. Like if you spend your life thinking about other people, it actually ruins your own life. You can't live a normal life because you're just thinking about someone else the whole time. So therefore the ayin hara is actually something that disturbs you. Forget everybody else. You're not hurting anybody else. You're hurting yourself, right? But he does take it one step further, and he says, actually, it's more than hurting yourself. You are actually hurting the other person. And somehow he explains in his own Kabbalistic way, when you have jealousy towards somebody else, you somehow put something in the air that destroys that other person's life. Somehow you can actually give that person a curse just by being jealous. He says there's two things in Ayin Hara. The first thing is you destroy your own life because you spend your life worrying about everybody else, and you're thinking about everybody else, but worry about yourself. Don't worry about everybody else. The second thing is actually, he says something goes in the air. When you worry about somebody else, something flies in the air and actually gives them a curse. And this is actually consistent with the second opinion, which is a Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish was a great rabbi who lived not so long ago, actually, only died about 50 or 60 years ago, lived in Bnei Brak, a very, very great man. And he says that actually, in his opinion, a person can actually damage a person with bad thoughts. So you can actually more metaphysically destroy somebody by having bad thoughts about them. So just by looking at someone and having a bit of jealousy or just giving them a sort of a bad sort of stare, you can actually somehow physically destroy their life. And he says that's a foundation of creation. Just like the sun goes up and the sun goes down, he's saying that you can actually destroy somebody's life just by thinking about them. And it's quite interesting. Now, there is something called, and is Jeff Pure here? I think he is. I saw him before. I'm going to mention a bit later something called Schrodinger's cat paradox. I don't know if anyone's heard of that before. I was just reading about it. I'll try and bring it a bit later. But if Jeff, you're on the line and you know about it, you can help us. But I'm going to move to the next concept. So let's go back. There's a few opinions about this. The first one is Ayin Hara means you're destroying your own life because you're always jealous about somebody else. Is that actually, so you could actually physically hurt somebody by thinking badly about them. There is a third opinion by Rav Soloveitchik, which is something a bit more tangible and something we can understand. And he says that we know nowadays that there are a lot of people, and especially you see it on social media, who their whole life is based on what other people think of them. In other words, if they know that people like them, they feel good about themselves. If they put something on Facebook and they get 1,000 likes, they feel good about themselves. But their whole life is based on that, right? Their whole life is based on that. And those type of people, if they meet somebody and they try to show off about how good they are and they don't get the same reaction they wanted, they feel bad. In other words, you've actually destroyed their life. So, someone could have a very big success. You could be just graduated from college, or you might have won something or done something really cool in whatever your field of, your career. All you need is one person just to go, oh, it's good luck, or, someone helped you, or you didn't do it all yourself. And suddenly you feel terrible, right? We know what that feels like. And that's exactly what Ayin Hara is. It's like a psychological thing. You can actually destroy somebody's sense of confidence and sense of self just with one sort of bad look from your eye, just sort of one nod, just like, not too happy. And we see that in the story of Haman, right? We know Haman was second in charge of the whole Persia. Ahasuerus was one of the mightiest kings in the world. Haman was second in charge, and he had everything he wanted, except there was one Jew called Mordechai who would not bow to him, right? One Jew. Out of thousands and thousands and thousands of people, one Jew bothered him. And because he refused to bow to him, Haman's whole sense of confidence, just flew out the window. And that's what he calls an Ayin Hara. Now, one of the famous people in the Torah that we know did not have any Ayin Hara was Joseph. Joseph is known as somebody that did not have any Ayin Hara. Now, I'm going to explain why, and then later on we'll actually see one of the remedies for Ayin Hara is actually using Joseph's name. We'll come to that later because I'm going to give you some remedies as well for Ayin Hara. But let me just go through Joseph for a second because this concept's really clear with him. We all know the story of Joseph, how he had all these dreams, right? He had a dream that 11 stars were bowing to him and 11 sheaves of wheat were bowing to him. And he went and told his brother and his father these dreams. And they said to him, Joseph, you're just dreaming, stop it, go back to being a shepherd, leave us alone. So Joseph had all these dreams and everyone just said, leave us alone, it's all rubbish. But we do know that Joseph's dreams came true, right? Now, what we know is that Joseph, despite having all these dreams and aspirations, let's call it, even though people were trying to take it away from him, he kept going till it actually occurred. He did not let someone else's evil eye destroy his self-confidence. He was confident it would come true, and that's what happened. And that's why we say Joseph did not have the evil eye, because he had enough self-confidence to ignore other people and say, don't worry what they're saying, it's going to happen, and we know it came true. So we will talk about later one of the remedies of Ayin Hara, and I'll tell you about that later. Now, there is one or two other ideas of this Ayin Hara. So, and that is that when you see somebody who's doing well or being successful, you can question why they're successful. So you might see someone driving down the street in their new Porsche or their new Maserati, whatever. Everyone has Porsches nowadays, don't they? So what Maserati, whatever car it is, that's really cool and no one else has. And you might say, hey, why does that person deserve that Maserati? Why, right? And by you thinking that, you're actually disconnecting their blessing from God. Somehow, by you giving them this evil eye or this evil stare, you can disconnect their blessing from Hashem. So almost like, and what this rabbi is saying, the Zera Kodesh, is actually saying that you, as a bystander, can actually impact somebody's life. That's what Ayin Hara is. I can disconnect somebody's blessing from heaven just by being a bit jealous of them. So that's another opinion. And finally, another sort of a way to think about it is when I look at somebody and say, you know, why is this person so wealthy and I'm not, type thing, what you're actually doing is asking God to judge them. You're saying to God, look at this person over here, you know, why has this person got $10 million and I've only got one? You know, why is that? And it actually causes in some spiritual way, God to look at them and say, you know, hang on, maybe you're right. You know, why are we questioning this guy's wealth? Maybe God needs to rejudge them, and that's exactly what happens. And that's the Ayin Hara. So let's just summarize that, because I've given you like quite a few different concepts. Let's go back to what we started. The Ayin Hara is definitely a concept that's recorded in the Mishnah in Halakha. It's something we worry about, right? It is something that's real in our lives. The question is, what actually is it? What is the Ayin Hara? So we had the one opinion that said, well, Ayin Hara is actually just me destroying my own life because I keep worrying about everybody else, not worrying about myself. But Ayin Hara is actually just a personal thing that I'm doing to myself. Another opinion is no, actually, by you looking at somebody being jealous, you are actually, as an innocent bystander, well, you're not innocent, but as a bystander, making somebody's life hell. You're actually causing them grief because you're thinking about them. And one rabbi says actually like some physical thing. It's actually like a physical curse you're putting on them. And one rabbi says, no, it's more psychological. In other words, everyone likes their own confidence, their own self-worth. By you putting the evil eye in them and going, oh, you don't really deserve that Maserati, you're taking away their confidence, right? So it's actually a psychological thing. And finally, the more spiritual thing is that when I look at somebody and say, why is this person so successful? It somehow makes God look at them and goes, well, why are you questioning this person? You know, and he goes and judges them as well. So it's almost like, you know, sometimes with our, you know, I'm driving in the car with my kids and suddenly you see this kind of very fancy sports car flying down the road, you know, and no one thinks, oh, that person's so cool. Everyone goes, what an idiot, right? What an idiot. So, you know, who does he think he is? So, you know, it's almost like me saying to that person, you know, God's going to judge you. You know, you're showing off your Maserati and flying down like a fool down the street. It's almost like you're bringing judgment onto that person. So that is really what the evil eye is. And I think you can take whatever concept you want. It sort of all makes sense. If you believe in more the spiritual world, you can say, no, your Ayin Hara is actually causing someone some grief. On the other hand, you could actually think of more like a psychological thing, which is actually that you're just destroying their own self-confidence and their own self-worth. So that's really what the evil eye is about. Now, are there any questions, by the way, on that? Does anyone sort of, does it make sense? Like a few nods around the room? I've got a thumbs up from Bruce, that's good. Carmel's got a question, and Susie. All right, Carmel, you go first, and Susie, you go next.
Firstly, I didn't think that we believe in superstition. And secondly, do we believe in wearing an evil eye?
Okay, very good. So Carmel, I will get to your questions because now we're just discussing the concept. I will touch on wearing things, and I want to definitely discuss the red string. You probably all heard of the red string. Anyone who's been to the Kotel, or Jerusalem, you'll see like an old Sephardi lady sitting on the stairs selling you a red string. And you'll notice even celebrities wear red strings, so like Madonna, I think, wears one. So we'll discuss the concept of the red string and also wearing those eyes that you're mentioning. So yeah, we'll come to that. Susie, did you have a question as well? Or was it the same question?
Oh no, I just said that I didn't think we believed in superstition.
Wait for it. We don't, okay. But wait for it. Wait for it.
Okay. Thank you.
If I don't answer it, I'll come back to you. Any other questions? We'll keep going otherwise. Susie, you got a question? Oh, she's just waving to me. You're on mute. You have to unmute yourself.
I believe that the person who is jealous of the other person is only affecting themselves and not affecting the other person. I also feel, after what you have said, the word superstition really doesn't come into it, because superstition is a different meaning to what you have said. It's an investigation. It is an intrusion on people's lives, which you shouldn't have. But I really believe the person who feels that against other people doing well, they're looking for the answers, but it's eating into their body and affecting them very, very much.
Okay, very good. So you're a believer in Rabbeinu Yonah. You have very good authority to rely on from the 13th century rabbi. That's exactly what he said, that it eats you up yourself and doesn't impact other people. Very good. But I think, even if you don't believe in the spiritual side of things about you can impact other people, I think that psychological thing means a lot as well, because it actually means that by you being jealous of somebody else or not giving them the time of day, you can actually impact somebody's life as well. You can click that like on Facebook, or you click the thumbs down on Facebook, and it actually impacts somebody. So thank you, Susie. But I think, just going back to your comment about superstition, a lot of the superstitions in this world, and I will talk about some of them a bit later, do come back to the evil eye. Like the whole thing we do about superstition is bringing this sort of evil eye, whatever you want to call it, into your life. And we'll talk about some of the old, the touch wood type ones, or the black cat. We'll talk about those later, and whether they have any concept of Judaism. But if you look back, it's actually about bad luck or evil eye as well. So they are connected in a funny way. But let's move on, and then we'll explain it. So I think where I'm at the moment is, at least where I've come to a landing, is that evil eye does exist. We don't know what exactly it means, because it could mean you're destroying your own body or you're destroying somebody else. But the Talmud discusses how to avoid it, how to avoid this evil eye. And it could mean whatever concept you believe in, whether it's avoiding the evil eye for yourself or for somebody else. So there are two suggestions I'm going to share now. The first one is from the Bava Basra. It says that if you really want to avoid the evil eye, run to a forest and make sure nobody sees you. Now, it doesn't mean that literally. Don't take that literally. What it means is basically have a nice, humble, quiet life. Right? That's all it means. Don't show off. Don't build a beautiful house and then show everybody all the gold, ceilings that you have. Put a nice big fence around it so no one can see it. If you have a nice car, fine, drive a nice car, but it doesn't have to be that zooped up Maserati. You can just have a nice car that works. That's one idea. And how does that work? The idea is that really it works for both ways. Firstly, you don't invite other people to judge you and give you the evil eye. But secondly, you don't worry about what other people are thinking. A lot of people drive nice cars and nice houses because they want people to show off. They want to. I'm not judging anybody who has a nice car on this call, by the way. You all have entitled to a nice car. But some people drive nice cars because they just want to show off. They don't actually care. Still gets you from A to B. What they want to do is they want to get approval from people, and that really, and if you're a bit quieter and humble, it can remove the evil eye. The other suggestion is, if you don't want the evil eye to impact you, and have other people bring on the evil eye, the suggestion is don't worry about what other people are doing. In other words, if you don't want others to look at your possessions, don't look at their possessions, right? A lot of people have this concept where, oh, what do you have? Or what do you have? That's how it comes up. If I'm not worried about what you do, you don't worry about what I do, the evil eye's out of the equation. And that's really what it's all about. So in other words, the advice is don't spend time looking at others and what they have. Just worry about yourself. Worry about yourself. And that's more to do with the psychological one. So the two suggestions are, one is live humbly, don't show off, run to the forest, you know, just live a life where you're not sort of showing off. The other one is don't spend time worrying about other people, right? Because that's a really good piece of advice, because what it's telling you is that if you stop worrying about other people, you'll be happier with yourself, right? But secondly, you want to bring the evil eye on them as well. Now, I'm going to go a bit further. That's sort of part one of the discussion. Interestingly, and I think I said this story before to some of our shiur participants, is that there's a rabbi in Bnei Brak. He only recently passed away, but he was one of the greats. And somebody went up to him and said, look, I just bought this new Mercedes, and this guy lives in Bnei Brak. Now, anyone who's been to Bnei Brak, no, it's quite like average to poor suburb. Most people do not have cars. If they do have a car, it's like a beat up old, you know, Toyota from 20 years ago, right? That's the cars people drive in Bnei Brak. But this person made it, and he went and bought himself a new Mercedes. But he was a bit worried about the ayin hara, right? He was worried that he'd get the evil eye from people because they're all driving these old beat up cars, you know, the old Taragos that have got dents in them. And he's driving around with this, you know, shiny new black Mercedes. So he went to the rabbi and he said, look, Rabbi, I'm a bit worried. You know, I bought this Mercedes. I'm worried that they're going to give me the evil eye. Now, this rabbi says, okay, that's interesting. So he says to him, you know, how much Torah do you study every night? He says, oh, I study an hour. He goes, how many books of the Talmud have you finished? He goes, oh, you know, I finished one book. He goes, so you're saying that you study for 1 hour every night and you maybe finish one book of the Talmud. He goes, don't worry, no one's going to be jealous of you. So this rabbi in his pure sort of thought says, you know, no one cares about cars. They care about how much Torah you know. And if you don't know any Torah, no one's going to be jealous of you, right? What the real jealousy is, I want to study Torah like you. You know, if you've got 10 books of the Talmud under your belt, that's something to be jealous of, not just the Mercedes. So it's just an interesting concept to think about it. Like, you know, he's worried about his possessions. The rabbi's saying, it's all a load of rubbish anyway. Okay, now, we're going to now, so I think just to summarize where I'm up to is, we know now that the evil eye exists, according to what I've told you. We know there are different interpretations of what it actually means. And I've given you 1 or 2 ways to avoid the evil eye, which is, you know, be humble and don't worry about everybody else. Just look at yourself. Now, the question is like this. What types of, I guess, superstitions can we use in the Jewish religion? How far do we go? So, and this is a really important concept because there are a lot of different ideas that we as Jewish people do to remove the evil eye or to avoid the evil eye. So now I'm going to go into the concept of the red string and maybe the chamsa, which is the hand. What does it actually do? Like, does it do anything? But I think to understand that concept, we actually need to talk about what is considered Jewish and what is considered the ways of the non-Jewish people, the ways of the Gentiles. So I mentioned before that my Armenian friend had something called a blue string. We had the red string, she has the blue string. She also said that they use this little eye-like jewel that they wear. And inside is a little a jewel inside. So it's an little eye and a jewel inside. And she actually sent me a picture of it as I was talking to her. So can you send me a picture? And she told me that on one of her eyes, the jewel had popped out. I said, what does that mean? She said, oh, it means someone gave her the evil eye and the jewel popped out and saves her life from evil eye. It's like, okay, that's very interesting. So the question is, you know, and Carmel asked before, you know, can we wear this evil eye? Is it something that we wear? So I'm going to just go through some of the laws about what are Jewish concepts and what aren't, and then we can talk about what the red string does for us and some other superstitions. So the main source for the rules of superstition comes from the Torah. The Torah tells us after we left Egypt, so we were slaves in Egypt, we left Egypt, and God tells us, I'm not sure where this is, it's in Vayikra, in the book of Leviticus. It says, do not go in the ways of the land of Egypt. Do not follow what they do in Egypt. Now, what does that mean? Don't follow what they do in Egypt. So this is obviously referring to the Egyptians, but it actually means any type of nation that is not Jewish. Do not follow what the non-Jews do. And we do have this concept of Jewish people not going in the ways of the non-Jews, okay? And we'll talk about that in a second, what that actually means, because there are examples of things we do not do as Jews because it is the way of the non-Jews, the way of the Gentiles. We call it the way of the goyim. So, and I say goyim in the nicest possible way, because goyim just means nations, the other nations. Sometimes we say goyim and it sounds a bit derogatory. When I say goyim, what I'm talking about, goyim just means the nations. We don't follow the other nations, we follow the Jewish nation. So the Torah tells us, do not follow Egypt and the other nations. We have to follow what's in our Torah. Don't follow them. Now, the Ramban, which is the Nachmanides, the Ramban was a Spanish rabbi, and he was also a very, very big Kabbalist. He was big into the Kabbalah, but also a halachic authority. And he explained what it means not to follow the ways of the Egyptians or the ways of the Gentiles. And he says, firstly, we know that the Gentiles, and especially the Egyptians in this case, followed demons. Like their whole life was about, get rid of this demon and that demon and all these black magic type things. And in fact, we do know, we actually believe that the Egyptians had some type of black magic in those days, whatever that meant. And it's actually called the shiur because they somehow put this demon that it was depicted by a goat's face. That's what they had, demons. And I think if you do go to some artwork, you'll see demons with goat faces. But there are two things that we say we don't follow the Egyptians or the Gentiles about. One is following demons, and one is licentious behavior, right? We are a very moral nation. The Egyptians were very immoral people. So we don't want to follow the Egyptians in those two aspects. One is demons, black magic, and one is licentious behavior. Okay. Now, in terms of actual halakha, the Tosefta, which is part of the Talmud, tells us what are considered the ways of the non-Jews. It's called Darkei HaEmori, the ways of the non-Jews, or Chukot HaGoy. So he brings a list of things that we don't want to do that copies the non-Jews, right? So just to give you some comfort, it doesn't say you can't wear glasses because non-Jews wear glasses. That's okay. You're allowed to wear glasses. Harold, I see you wear glasses. You're safe. You can wear glasses, right? It doesn't mean we can't wear clothes that non-Jews wear, because we do. We go into our Target and Myer and Gucci and whatever else, all brands we buy, Myers, we buy non-Jewish clothes. That's okay, as long as it's modest. Technology, right? Even though we know all the Jews created technology, we created Apple and Samsung and, we Microsoft, it's all Jewish, right? That's what we believe anyway. That's a joke. But we'd have technology just like the non-Jews. But he does list a bunch of examples that follow the non-Jewish way. And one example is, for example, it says you can't wear your hairstyle like the non-Jews. And his example is actually when you shave all your hair and leave the middle hanging up, which I think nowadays we call the mohawk, right? So we cannot grow a mohawk, right? Sorry, Jeff, I know you wanted to grow one, but mohawks are out of the question because that is what the non-Jews lived like. And in fact, if you look back in history, actually the mohawk did have to do with idol worship. Somehow leaving the hair in the middle had to do with idol worship. And I think if you look at those, the Hare Krishnas or one of those, the orange people, whatever they're called, they actually do have little hair on top of their head, which probably comes from this idol worshipping thing. I've seen in the city before, they've tried to convert me. I told them I was too busy, I had to get to Shule, so I couldn't talk to them. But that is what they wear. And he brings some other examples of what the non-Jews do. For example, he says if your bread falls on the floor, the non-Jews used to pick it up and say something about a candle saving dead people. I don't know what it is, we don't really understand what it is, but he actually brings a list of all these things that we as Jewish people do not do because it is based on some degree of black magic or whatever things they believed in those days. So there are clear-cut examples of things we keep away from and things that we are allowed to do. So he actually brings in that list, by the way, the red string. It actually says the red string is a non-Jewish concept, and in fact, we are not allowed to use it because it belongs to the Gentiles and black magic. But let me hold that thought for a second. Now, interestingly, the Talmud goes on to say, but by the way, if you see some type of weird voodoo practice that actually has medicinal purposes, you're allowed to do it. And if you go through the Talmud, you will see pages and pages of Talmudic remedies for different ailments. Now, any doctor that looked at it nowadays would just go, that doesn't make any sense, right? It doesn't apply nowadays because we have modern day medicine. But in the times of the Talmud, they did have these remedies that in there somehow worked. It worked for them. Now, I don't know if it actually worked or their bodies were different or the science was different. It doesn't matter. But the fact is that if there's any of these voodoo magic things that can actually be used for health reasons or therapeutic reasons, we are allowed to do it. And the Gemara does actually bring a bunch of things that you can do. Like, you boil up hyssop and you put in red dye and you drink it. It will help you from I don't know, whatever it is, leprosy, whatever the word is. So the Torah tells us that even though there are a list of these voodoo type magic things, as long as there's a concept that is medically proven in those days, it is okay. It's got to be scientifically proven. Now, the Rambam, who we know was actually a very famous doctor as well as a rabbi. The Maimonides, the Rambam, was the doctor to the Sultan. He was born in Spain, as we know, and moved on to Egypt. And if you go to Spain nowadays in Cordoba, you'll see, there are the statues of him. He was a very famous rabbi, and he was the doctor to the Sultan or the head of Egypt, or the Sultan of Spain, whatever it was. But he was a doctor, and he actually wrote a medical book. And in fact, nowadays, a lot of people actually keep the diet of the Rambam because he had such good medical knowledge. Now, he said in his book, that he was a halachic person as well. He said that in those days, what they did was, and I don't know how this works because we're just going to think this is weird, but the Talmud tells us that one of the cures they used for different sicknesses was to take the nail out of gallows that they hung a person from. So they went to the gallows where someone got hung. They took out the nail, they put it in their house, and somehow helped them. Or they used the tooth of a fox for whatever other ailment as well. So the Rambam says that is not voodoo magic. In those times, however it helped, the nail of a gallows or the tooth of a fox helped them in those aspects. The Rambam tells us that is not voodoo magic. You're allowed to use it. It just proves to you that you can use these funny things that to us sound like some magic. As long as it's got some scientifically proven basis for it, it's okay. Now, nowadays, we don't use the nail of gallows, right? I don't think we have gallows anymore, or the tooth of a fox. But there are many things in the Gemara that could make sense. For example, it talks about using vinegar for different things. But the point of the Rambam is to say that even though there are all these superstitious things around, you're allowed to use them as long as it's got some type of medical reason for it. So that would apply today as well. If we can find some voodoo magic, as long as there's some medically, scientifically proven thing, it's okay. And there's also an argument between different rabbis. One is a French rabbi and one is a Polish rabbi about the list that I mentioned before. There's a list that said about having funny haircuts and dropping things on your bread. So they discuss whether it's only that list or it goes into further things as well. And one of the rabbis says that if it sounds like it's voodoo magic, it is, and don't touch it. If it sounds like all very strange, keep away from it. It's probably witchcraft or based on witchcraft. We don't want to go near it. Whereas another rabbi says, no. It's not. If it's not in that list, it's okay. It's not on the list, it's all right. You're allowed to do it. What's important to remember is it's very practical. So we said before, you can't wear the clothes of non-Jews. It means clothes that non-Jewish people specifically wear. So he says, for example, you're allowed to wear a white outfit if you're a doctor. That's not the ways of the non-Jews. That's a uniform that you wear. And you're allowed to wear a shirt, right? This is not the ways of a non-Jew wearing a shirt because people wear shirts. We're talking about specific types of clothing that we don't wear. I was going to say the priest collar, that they wear in church, but I think our Shule used to wear them in our rabbis. So maybe it's not a good example. I think you look at the picture of Rabbi Nagel on the wall, he used to have what are they called? We call it a dog collar, but there's a proper word for it, I think. Len, you'll correct me, or Susie, you'll tell me what.
He was the only one.
What?
He was the only one.
Oh, he was the only one. Okay, there we go.
Yes, he believed.
But I think that could be explained.
No, he wasn't. Reverend Cordlow wore one as well.
There we go. You can safely say there that is not priest clothing. That is probably just clerical clothing or used by ministers of religion. So that's okay. Now, I promised I'd talk about the red string, and we're going to get to that. Now, just out of interest, does anybody wear a red string on this call? Anyone wear one? No. Not very superstitious, are we? Okay, that's good. But you've all heard of the red string. We've all seen it in Jerusalem, and you probably thought about buying one yourself. Should I get the red string or not? So I mentioned before that the Tosefta, the Gemara, the Talmud actually tells us that red strings is voodoo witchcraft. Nothing to do with the Jewish religion. Nothing to do with it. But the fact is, we do see a lot of people walking around with red strings, right? It is a common concept. Now, there are different rabbis that discuss the red string, and this is an important discussion because this will impact all the other superstitious things that we know about in our religion as well. and whether they're real or not. But we're going to focus on the red string and talk about some others. So the first thing is to remember that it says here you can't wear a red string, but actually the concept of the red string came from somewhat else. It actually comes from the concept where it says you cannot put red, you can't put a string on red, not a red string. Don't put string on red. What does that mean? It means that there was some concept in the times of the Talmud where if somebody got a wound, which is bleeding, which is red, they put a string on top of it. Now, I suppose it's the modern day Band-Aid, I guess that's what they had, right? So you put a string on top of it. So what this rabbi says is that is not voodoo magic. That is not the ways of the Gentiles. That is okay to put string on red, no problem. Now, there is another rabbi that says, no, in fact, he has a tradition from his family that the red string actually does help. So he disagrees. It says, actually, the red string does have some type of power and we can use it. That's another rabbi from the 1800s. And there's another rabbi from, I'm not sure what year he lived, maybe it's more modern. And he says that he did hear in his family that they used a red string and tied it on a baby. And why did they tie the string on the baby? Because they didn't want people looking at the baby and saying, oh, how cute is this baby? He's so cute, you know, and give him the ayin hara. Rather, they looked at the red string and sort of, you know, it drew their attention away from the beautiful baby and they looked at the red strings. It sort of took away their concept of ayin hara as well. So you can see how the red string went from today where we wear this red string around your hand to this other concept of why they use the red string. And this rabbi says, actually, I do allow the red string. He's saying, look, I don't really believe it's a big thing, but if you want to wear a red string, he's not going to stop you. It's not a big deal. And now I do have here, and I'll show you my page. This is, you probably can't see it, but this is a letter from the patent office in the US, the United States. It's a rejection of a patent that's written to the Kabbalah Center in Los Angeles. Oh, it's actually in New York, actually. It's to the Kabbalah Center. And what they did was they tried to put a patent on the red string, right? In other words, they put a patent on it. Why? Because if they have a patent on it, they can make more money, right? And they can say, oh, you know, the red string now belongs to the Kabbalah Center and we want to put a patent on it. But they got rejected on the basis that it's a religious practice and you can't put a patent on religious practice. So they got rejected. Now, just out of interest, this is a Kabbalah Center, right? These are the people that believe in the Kabbalah and the mystics, right? It sounds a bit funny that they're trying to put a patent on this red string. Obviously, it's not a real thing, right? It sounds like a business idea to me rather than any religion. If they really believed there was a holy object and it did something, they would probably tell the world about it. But no, they decided to patent it. But they got rejected, which is probably a good thing. And for that reason, we can find you know, an elderly lady at the cocktail sitting there selling you a red string. Now, so the red string is really something that we, if you ask me if it does anything, I'd probably tell you based on Talmudic sources or what I just described, it does nothing. There's no basis in halakha, it's not written in the Torah, it doesn't mean anything. We do believe in the ayin hara, but it's not the red string that gets you away from it, right? It's what stops you is being jealous of other people and being humiliated.
Hello.
Yes, Esther.
Sorry to interrupt. Well, I don't think that lady's there anymore at the cocktail.
Oh well,
but,
there's a new lady.
No, but she used to curse you if you didn't buy the string.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. If you didn't buy her red string, she used to go, you cursed person. So
she in Yiddish she used to tell you all these things that, you know, it'll happen to your family and all this. You know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's very true. So, but you can buy them in Judaic stores as well, this red string. And you definitely do see people walking around with it. Now, we're going to get on to now a discussion. And by the way, before I do move on to the next sort of question, I've only got a few minutes left. There are people, Jewish people, religious people, that will remove the ayin hara from you. And I can send you a link later. You can actually Google it. It's on the Aish HaTorah website. About a lady who, for $101 US, will remove the red string from you, remove the ayin hara from you. And whether it works or not, I don't know, because there obviously are different Kabbalistic concepts you can use, but it's not something that we would recommend necessarily. But the story in the Aish HaTorah website actually talks about a lady that was having trouble in her life. and she called this lady up in Jerusalem, and she paid her money, and the lady sort of mixed some lead around her pot and said that she saw the eye coming out of the lead, and she melted more lead and she got rid of the evil eye, and her life did turn around. There we go. So that's a story for you. In terms of mainstream Judaism, we don't necessarily believe in that concept, and definitely not if you have to pay money for it, because we're not a religion of taking money for religious things. You can always tip your rabbi, that's not a problem, but we don't take money for remedies like that. Now, in terms of Ayin Hara, there is a couple of superstition things that we do actually strongly believe in. I'm going to go through some of them. And there's still some disagreements as to whether it still exists. But there is one very famous one that we do. And that is, we know that you should not marry, a man should not marry a woman who's got the same name as his mother, right? And we know that a woman should not marry a man who's got the same name as her father. That is from Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. Now, this is not recorded in the Talmud. This is something that Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid wrote in his will to his family. He actually wrote a number of different ideas, and a lot of them we do keep nowadays. Now, we'll discuss whether we actually keep them or not, but it's the famous Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. He also wrote there, don't open other people's mail. That was another one he wrote in his will. So basically, when he died, he wrote a will, and nowadays we know that many great rabbis die, and instead of leaving all their possessions in their will to their family, because most of them don't have any possessions, right? They're quite poor, the great rabbis. What they do is in their will, they give advice to their children, okay? And often at funerals of great rabbis in Israel, they actually read out the will, and it actually talks to the generation. So just recently, there was a rabbi that died, and he was dirt poor, he had no money to his name, but he wrote a will. And in his will, he wrote, this is what I want from my family and from the whole Jewish nation. And he wrote a whole list of things that he wants the Jewish people to do, which is a beautiful thing. In his letter, he wrote, do not marry, a man shouldn't marry a wife who's got the same name, or the other way around, a woman should marry a man with the father's same name. Now, if you go to the Adas community or Yeshiva community, this is a very big thing. And before we even let a girl and a boy go on a shidduch, we'll say, what's the girl's name? What's the father's name? What's the mother's name? You make sure there's no common names. But not everyone believes in it. Not everyone. And there's a argument, and I don't know if you can see the pictures of the rabbis I've got here. There's three different rabbis, right? See, three different rabbis. One of them is the Chida, is a Sephardi Kabbalist. One of them is a Noida Yehuda, a Polish-German rabbi. And this one is the Chasim Sofer. He's from Poland, right? These three rabbis disagreed of whether we have to follow Yehuda HaChassid or not. In fact, there's even more. So today we have a Rabbi Yosef, who's a Sephardi rabbi. Here's a picture of him. And Ramosha Feinstein. These five rabbis disagree amongst themselves whether we have to worry about this or not. One rabbi's opinion is Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid knew what he was doing and listened to him. One rabbi's opinion is that this concept is not discussed in the Talmud at all. In fact, it's the opposite. In the Talmud, it says that a bunch of, one of his other ones is that two brothers can't marry two sisters, another one of his Kabbalistic concepts. But we know in the Talmud that it happened all the time. Two brothers married two sisters. In fact, there's a story where 80 Kohanim married the sisters of their, 80 brothers married 8 sisters, whatever the number is, 8 brothers married 8 sisters. One rabbi says, ignore him. One rabbi says that he just wrote it for his family because he saw with prophecy that somehow in his family, if you married the wrong person, it would somehow cause trouble. Another rabbi says, look, and this is what we call a gray area. He said, in these types of gray areas where it's not written in the Torah, so it's not clear cut, he says, for these, I'm going to tell you a general rule. The general rule is, if these things bother you, then worry about it. If they don't bother you, don't worry about it, which is a bit of a cop-out. He's basically saying, for some people, this is very important, all these sort of Kabbalistic ayin haras, and for some people, it doesn't really matter. So what his advice to people was, if you find a nice girl, and you fall in love with her, and she happens to have the same name as your mother, don't worry so much about it, right? And there are other ways around it as well. For example, often they add names onto it. They add names. For example, if your name is Moshe and your father-in-law's name is Moshe, right? Sometimes they'll say your name is Moshe Hillel and your name is Moshe Chaim, and then it's okay type thing. So there are different ways to change it. Or they might just be called by another name. One could be called Moshe and one could be Moshe. So as long as it's not exactly the same name, it's all right. There's definitely a discussion around this, whether we believe in it or not. So I think what we've learned is that there are definitely concepts which are complete voodoo magic, right? Ways of the non-Jews that we do not believe in. There are things that are completely legitimate that we do believe in, and there are things that are gray area. Gray area is the red string. Gray area is this, you can't marry a woman with the same name as your mother type thing. That is gray area. And that's where you're going to find different opinions from different rabbis. And a lot of people, someone just sent me a message, and a lot of people do believe in it, and a lot of people do not believe in it. Now, in terms of superstition, right? A lot of people have this this hand. It's called a chamsa, right? You can Google after. It's a hand. Some people have a Magen David inside. Some people have a fish inside it. But it's basically a hand. If you look back in our religion, the history of it, it actually comes from a Muslim Arabic concept, where the daughter of Fatima or something like that put it outside her house, and she used it when the husband came back with his second wife, and she got jealous and she put the hand there. Or some say it's to do with the 5 pillars of the Muslim religion. There are 5 pillars, and that's what the hand is. So somehow a lot of these concepts have crept into our religion, and people have latched onto it and somehow believe that it's a superstitious thing, which is quite interesting. And that's something that we have to think about as well, because when we look at all these superstitions, are they actually Jewish concepts? Or are they things that have crept into our religion like other things as well? And going back to my Armenian friend who believed in the evil eye with the blue string, who created this blue string? Where did it come from? How did theirs turn blue? How did ours turn red? And why is their charm an eye and ours is a red string and ours is a hand? Like, it doesn't really make sense. So we have to remember that a lot of things creep into our religion along the way, and we have to be really careful of what's real and what isn't real. And someone once came to Reb Chaim Kanievsky, a great rabbi in Bnei Brak. He's like the current, guru of halacha. I said, "Oh, do you believe in this and do you believe in that?" He goes, "Look, I don't know all this stuff. All I know is what's written in the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch tells me how to be a good Jew, and that's what I follow. I don't worry about all these red strings and these evil eyes and that type of thing." My father just wrote to me, thanks, Dad, that Tamar gives birth to twins, and she ties a red string onto the wrist of the baby that came out first. So there we go. So we know that that's a practical thing because she wanted to know who was the firstborn. But some people latch onto these things and think, oh, the red string, it's some mystical Kabbalistic concept. And in fact, I mentioned before that it does exist. Now, just to finish off, because I know I've gone slightly over time, we do have a lot of superstitious concepts. There's the black cat, there's the mirror, breaking the mirror, sitting on the edge of a table, walking under a ladder, opening an umbrella. You can name, go through hundreds of them. If you actually look at the origins of them, they have no basis in Judaism. No basis. There's nothing wrong with opening an umbrella inside. And sometimes at my workplace, when I was back in the office, sometimes on purpose, I just open the umbrella inside just to get people a bit nervous. Oh, my umbrella opened up, just the people think it's funny. Black Friday, the 13th of, Friday the 13th is a concept based on Jesus. Because he died on a Friday and his 13th disciple was the one that gave him up. So Friday the 13th became bad luck. The black cat, I can't remember what it is. A touch wood is they believe that the demons lived in the wood. So you touch wood, to make sure there's no demons inside. Breaking the mirror, they believe that your spirit was inside the mirror. So if you broke it, it's like you broke your spirit. All these things are made up. We do not believe in them. For us, that is voodoo magic. That's not gray area. If you believe in that, you're believing in voodoo magic. Right? As I said before, if you believe in the red string or the chamsa or the not marrying a woman with the same name as your mother, okay, it's gray area. It's not clear that it's allowed, not clear it's not allowed. It's not voodoo magic. But all these other things are. So I think whenever we see a current superstition of today, we need to be careful that it is based on our tradition. And Susie, to answer your question, we do have a lot of superstitions. For example, after Pesach, we bake a challah in the shape of a key. Right? Because the key represents the key to the gates of livelihood. So we build a key. Now, is that superstition? I don't know. Maybe it's just a resemblance of something. On Rosh Hashanah, we eat all these weird foods. We eat, pomegranates and dates, and we eat the head of a fish and the head of a ram, and we eat beetroot. So yes, you can look at it and just go, wow, that's voodoo magic. On the other hand, it is basically something that does have a concept because it's more resemblance. Now, Paul just sent me a question, which is a bit controversial. We know there are some type of, sorry, just let me thank everyone for joining us. I'm going to do a few questions now, but I'm going to stop the recording. But